We're shit about to get very progressive, let me tell you. It is Kingdom Death Monster time again, and we are painting one of my favorite miniatures. That's Aeneas the Wanderer. Now, I'm starting off here with this one, and you'll see the colors that I'm using just written down on the bottom left there through each section. But I'm starting off here with some of the colors, rather than the skin like I usually would. I'm starting off with some of the darker colors because this model has a lot of areas that are very close to the skin that I'm going to need dark colors on. I'm going to establish at least the base coats on a lot of these colors here, just to make sure that when I've painted up the skin, I'm not going to run the risk of running any of those dark colors over the skin and then having to basically relayer and touch it up. It's much easier to just touch up these darker colors than it is to do the skin almost completely again, because I'm going to be going a little bit more ham on the skin than usual. So you see me putting in just a couple of these base coats on all these areas here. We're really going to be sort of establishing everything and drafting it as we go here. I'm going through this one, what I would call Tabletop Plus standard. So you've seen a few speed paints of some of the smaller models here, but this one, I really like this character, the backstory, the sculpt, everything. So I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with this one. Now, you see they're applying the gold, and it's really even starting to sort of take shape, even without the skin being painted. I'm going to be going quite pale with the skin here, and at the moment I'm just assessing where else I need to put any of the paint before I paint that skin. So there's a bit of fur around the sort of tucked into the top of the boots there. I will leave the base largely untouched. If I have any excess paint that the base needs, I will probably put it on there, but I will do the base at the end. Now, this was interesting here as well. The blade is actually made of stone, so it's got a metal sort of haft on it, but then it's actually a stone blade, which I only noticed halfway through, and I didn't have the correct stone paint, so instead I just mixed a grey that I already had with a bit of black to make it a bit darker, and I will just reverse that process to highlight it up. I'm using my standard sort of chords and wraps sort of recipe here is deck 10 as a base. And what you're about to see here is an eye hack that I use on models like this. I just paint the eye, or at least the iris of the eye, before I actually paint the skin. And it can be pretty messy in that respect, because you're going to be painting the skin, and you can almost like box in that eye and sort of reduce it down. So it doesn't matter if you go well over the eye, because especially on this scale of a miniature, it's not like a bust where you've got plenty of room to play with. These are like one hairbrush to the pupil kind of deals. But it will look very messy there now, just establishing the whites of the eyes. But when we go and do the skin, we will actually circle that back in, and it kind of will make up for any of that. Now, I had a bit of that bone color left, so I just put it on the teeth that are in the sort of dead monster mouth she's standing in. And I'm going to be putting the first now shade over a couple of these areas. And the reason I'm doing that now before painting the skin, like I said, I want to avoid any splash, any sort of like bristle flick of any of the oils and shades that I'll be using potentially onto the skin, because I'm going to go very pale with this character's skin. And here I'm just layering this up before the paint dries, because as I said, I had to mix up that stone grey pretty much from scratch there, because I just didn't I didn't have it set out and ready, and I thought the blade was metal, but it is in fact stone. Now we get into the meat and potatoes. This is where I want to be. So this is going to be painting the skin, and we're going to start at a very common way that I start is just a burnt red with a sunny skin tone, a mix about 60-40. Now, I'm going to be doing multiple thin layers on this, and I'll show you exactly why. You want to do multiple thin layers to keep it nice and smooth. You see how smooth the skin is there? And I'm going to be, here's me boxing in that eye that I mentioned. You can just literally just reduce the white down to where it needs to be. It's a really good way to get the eyes under control rather than leaving them till last. But you see the smoothness of the skin there, and I'm going to make sure that it stays really smooth by thinning my skin tones and paints down quite a lot and applying multiple layers, and I'm going to keep the paint moving. Pale skin can be a little bit tough because it can be very chalky. The key to combat that thin the paints, multiple thin layers. So I'm doing per skin layer there that I'll do, and I'll do about sort of 6, I think, on this miniature. I'm doing those in multiple, so each one will actually be 2 or 3 coats. I'm going through and applying some of the sort of smaller highlights onto this blade. I don't mind how this stone actually was turning out, and I think it looks nice and fitting for Aeneas, the character, because she's a barbarian that just sort of waltzes into your settlement and eats all your shit. And it's just, I think this blade ends up suiting her quite well. I was also just waiting for that first layer of skin to dry. Super important that you don't go onto the next layer until your previous layer has dried, unless you're intending to wet blend, but we're not going to be doing that here. Now this second layer, this is going to go pretty much largely everywhere except for the deepest recesses. Because she doesn't have like a ripped six-pack or anything like that, we're not actually going to establish too much shade with that first layer around the stomach or anything like that. She's got quite a full, like, voluptuous figure, so the highlights are going to be softer. It's not really until here in layer 2 that we're going to start establishing some more definition with that paint, and it keeps it nice and soft and flowing. And again, we're just... I spent quite a bit of time on the skin here because of how many layers you have to do with the thinning of the paints, but otherwise you're going to get that chalky, blobby appearance, and it'll just look like shit. And especially where a model like this, where the skin is the focal point. So this is obviously, like, this is... I mean, it's not part of the pin-up series, but I mean, fucking open your eyes. It's really important that we nail down the skin here, especially standing as she is, kind of with that one hip popped up. That's obviously going to be a focal point, obviously, as well. And I've just started to do it here. I'm only going to shade that exposed side of her face that's kind of turned towards the viewer now, and it will create a little bit of natural shadow as I don't apply the rest of the layers to the other half of her face that's sort of tucked behind her hair. And it'll just give us a nice realistic lighting effect as we build up the skin more and more. Now, as far as the ears and stuff go, very similarly, we're going to be doing a little bit of touch-ups on the red hair and stuff, so it doesn't really matter if we get a little crazy with the smaller details. We can, much like the eyes, just tie it back in. Now, this is coming up to our first, what I would call, highlight. So this is where we're introducing a much lighter skin tone, and I'm going to start bringing up those really bright areas. Now, at first, this is going to stick out quite a lot on the model. You can see there where I've put the highlights, but that's where our next step will come in, because and you can see how much that's already brought to life the skin, and I haven't even done half the model there, but it's going to really draw the eye, and this is where we do our glaze blending. So this is where you're going to get a glaze of that exact skin tone highlight that we just used, and 4 or 5 times with a glaze, because glazing is slow as fuck, you're going to go over those areas, starting in the area you want to blend into and ending on your glaze tone color. And that will really tie it in. You see now how smooth that looks compared to how it looked in the previous step. I'm going to go through with the brightest highlight. This is by far the smallest area here, and this is going to just be on the extreme light catching peaks of these areas around there. We won't need to, if you've done everything right so far, we won't need to do too much glaze blending on this, and this will just make that skin really pop, which with pale skin, without getting chalky, that's what we want. We're going through now on the areas where we did a little bit with the cords and straps and stuff like that before, and we applied our Nuln Oil wash. We're just going to go through and layer it back up. It just makes it look a little bit nicer. You don't need to go, I mean, you can go multiple layers on this, similar to with the skin, but on areas where you're just doing, I would call this sort of tabletop plus standard maybe, where you're just doing that and not comp standard, focus in on the focal points of the miniature. You got to prioritize and not waste time. You know, if you're going to spend sort of like this, I would usually spend maybe 90 minutes on a normal figure. This is a touch-up check here. This is what I was talking about. I'm going to go through now anywhere where I was, prioritizing the skin in lieu of getting paint accidentally somewhere else. I'm now going to go touch up those areas. Now, as I was saying, you got to focus on the things like, as I said with Aeneas, the skin being the massive focal point, the spear being one as well, the blade of that spear, and her hair. Those are your big focal points. Usually the face of the miniature as well. You focus on those, and the rest you can just be, unless you're painting to a competition or a comp standard, or you really want to do a showcase piece, you don't have to really worry about areas that aren't going to draw too much of the eye. So it's not that you can be lazy, it's just your time is better spent elsewhere, unless you have 30, 40, 50, up to 100 hours to spend on a model. This totals from start to finish. As I said, I usually spend about 90 minutes on a piece this size. This was about 6 hours. So, I did of total paint time. I did give our girl Aeneas a little bit more love. We're going to finally start layering up the hair, and the hair is actually going to tie in so well with the rest of this. And I'm not just saying that because it's red hair, and I paint all the female characters that I like with red hair, which has become a standing joke. But this actually was part of the plan, regardless of that. Aeneas with red hair, it's going to blend nicely with the golds and with her pale skin. And all of the basing as well that you will see later, where she's standing in sort of this slain monster's mouth. Now, the dead skin and stuff over the shield and also the monster's tongue later on, I need to distinguish that from her skin, which is why I went so pale with her skin, and I'm going a little bit darker and a little bit more sort of rich with the skin tones on the monster and the slain skin on the shield. We're doing a bit of layering up now of the accessories. So the brown on the boots, the gloves, a little bit on the cloth there as well. The boots are going to get a couple of layers of highlights as well, because they are kind of half of her lower body. With the gloves, they're probably about half of the surface area of the model. So I'm going to put a little bit of effort into that too. Just going into the places there that catch the light. Keep in mind your lighting. Another spot check here. It's really important to just, kind of drink in what you've done and stop nitpicking yourself. As I said, prioritize what is going to draw the eye. Unless you are going, you really have to decide first whether you're going to go full send on something or whether it's going to be just get it ready for a game. So with this, as I mentioned, I'm going a little bit higher than tabletop standard. And so I'm taking stock of where I want to put my extra highlights. I want to try and keep anything that's going to be what I call tabletop plus here to under 10 hours, even if it's a large piece. I'm doing the last little highlight layer on these sort of loincloth area there, just to give it a little bit more depth. And I'm going to go through now and do the bone on the skulls that are just hanging off that spear too. Nothing that you guys haven't seen there with those skulls before. Using a contrast paint on small skulls and then just doing 1 or 2 highlights is more than enough, because the small skulls there are not going to be an important detail. Going through on the leather now, applying some highlights there as well. And we get to the actual lanterns. And people have been asking me to stop being lazy with the lanterns. Okay, fine. So this is the pupil, as I said. This was just terminal. You got black paint on the end of your smallest brush, and you're trying to do this without touching the ultra pale skin, which, thank God, we actually managed to succeed with, but that can be really, really annoying. Now, the lanterns here, as I was mentioning, I'm going to be starting with an orange. I'm going to be then doing an ice yellow, almost filling that in, but not quite. So we're keeping that gradient going. And then once that's dried, I'll be putting a white in the middle, and then I'll be doing a glaze of a glow effect over the top. Now, she does have a couple of cuts and bruises on her, and I wanted to pick this one out because it's in a focal area there, and I really wanted to do sort of the complexion of carved flesh underneath, and later you will see me add a small hairline of blood effect into there, and it really brings it to life like it's a flesh wound, a fresh wound of a flesh wound. Now, these are the little sutures that hold that together. I just want that to be the same color as our cord, and you can see here this is me applying that blood effect. Now, I've mentioned my love-hate relationship with Blood for the Blood God. People don't know when to put that shit down. It's a great effects paint, but you got to use it extremely sparingly. And just there, I use it extremely sparingly on a very, very small detail brush, just to add that lifelike quality to the wound. You can see here, this is me putting just the widest part of the flame, so the heart of the lantern or the heart of the beacon there. And now we're going to go around while that's drying, and we're going to put a very similar flesh recipe to what we did on her shield, just onto the tongue of this big thing that she's killed. I'm going to be using some red for the sort of gums and the just spare parts of monster, the viscera that she's sort of standing in. We're going to be layering that up as well and using Blood for the Blood God eventually. But this is that Tesseract glow that I mentioned. Now, I'm putting on a bit there initially, but I actually dry the brush off and go through and wick off quite a lot of that. So you can see there in this stage on those lanterns, even while I'm working on the teeth here and making them grimy and monster teeth, you can see that it's not overpowering with that Tesseract glow. I do a couple of layers on the teeth here, essentially a bone, a wash, the same bone, and then 2 highlights, up in a gradient to really give it that realistic teeth. Because this is a display base, I'm going to be doing a couple of layers of highlights on the viscera, the teeth, the tongue, all that sort of stuff. I did contemplate in the end putting a bit of work on the tongue in terms of a glaze varnish, but I didn't want it to distract from the from her skin. So again, drawing attention away from the focal points is a big mistake, and as is putting too much effort into something unless you're going to do that for the whole model. Pick 2 or 3 things that are really going to make it pop, and you'll get a massive improvement in result. If you're looking for just something slightly new, if you've just painted tabletop standard before, you're looking to branch out, pick one thing and get really good at it. My recommendation is skin, and it will make your models absolutely sing. So you can see here me just layering up the base here. I'm doing a little bit of work now with that blood for the blood god. As I said, you got to know when to put this shit down. It's extremely tempting to get carried away with it. But that little bit of gloss and blood effect, as I said, without me doing the varnish over the tongue to make it look too wet, it doesn't distract from Aeneas herself. And there you have it. That's one of my favorite paints I think I've ever done. I fucking love this character. I love the lore behind it. I love the mechanics. She's really, really fun to play. All the art around it is great. And look, that's just something fun. I haven't done a Tabletop Plus standard on the channel here. And I'm going to be painting a couple more things. I'm going to be painting some more of the monsters. But that's Kingdom Death, baby. And I will see you guys next time.